a power struggle between Sudanese Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, a commander of the paramilitary, I should say, Rapid Support Forces, spilled into war in mid-April and has since killed thousands of people and displaced millions. The East African Regional Bloc, IGAD, had invited the force to a meeting in Ethiopia's capital on Monday, while fighting still raged across Sudan. Neither Burhan nor Daglo personally attended the talks in Addis Ababa, although the RSF sent a representative to the quartet meeting led by Kenya, South Sudan, Djibouti and Ethiopia. IGAD said it will request the African Union to look into possibly or the possibility of deploying the East African Standby Force, usually tasked with election observers mission in Sudan for the protection of civilians and humanitarian access. Let's just listen into that meeting that transpired on Monday.
On 12th of June 2023, the IGAD Assembly of Heads of State and Government, having considered the situation in Sudan, established a high-level IGAD mechanism of four, the quartet, to engage in an effort to resolve the situation in Sudan. I am delighted to convene this first meeting of the quartet today. In this regard, I welcome the members as well as the representatives of the two parties in Sudan. I also note and wish to thank all the partners that have joined us at this meeting. Pursuant to our decision in Djibouti, our Ministers of Foreign Affairs convened on the 19th of June this year. There has been a number of engagements aimed at securing a cessation of hostilities and commencing dialogue at various levels. During this period, I have also undertaken consultations with a number of neighboring countries, including Egypt, Eritrea, Chad, Central African Republic, as well as the African Union Chair, the President of Comoros, and of course, many hours of planning with my brother, Prime Minister Abiy. In all the instances, there has been a strong emphasis in support of the IGAD effort to end the conflict, address the worsening humanitarian crisis, and facilitate engagement in an inclusive political process that restores civilian governance to Sudan.
Well, the sentiments there of President William Ruto during that particular meeting, it was a no-show for some of his leaders. We just want to put that into perspective with the panelists so far. And maybe I will begin with you, Professor Peter Kagwanja, because the sentiment that has been put forward is that they didn't participate in this particular meeting because of Kenya particularly presiding over this IGAD meeting and Kenya having taken sides as far as supporting RSF is concerned.
Well, I think this issue was put on the table a long time ago by the military in Sudan, which essentially said that it's not going to participate if Kenya is the one that is chairing. But remember, the decision that Kenya should chair did not come from Kenya, so it came from IGAD. And I think IGAD did not alter its own position that was taken in Djibouti, that Kenya is the one to chair that particular process and that it's going to involve other three countries. Therefore, that's why we're talking about the quartet. And therefore, it's all a question of whether the military in the Sudan is willing to have IGAD as a mediator, because what IGAD chooses is what it thinks is in its best interest, and possibly a country with capacity. And when you look at the countries that were chosen, I don't know what Sudan would be up to, because South Sudan itself is being mediated by IGAD. Mm-hmm. Its own crisis is in the hands of IGAD as we speak. Now, if you look at Ethiopia, Ethiopia is having its own crisis in Tigray, and the case is being handled by the African Union and very closely the countries within IGAD. And the countries within IGAD here refer to Kenya, one of the countries that have been a key player in the mediation of Ethiopia. Now, the other country involved is Djibouti, of the quartet, I think. Now, and when you look at Djibouti itself, it's a small country within the region, and the chair and the host of IGAD. So therefore, for me, the most qualified country to deal with this matter is Kenya, because at least we have put our act together in all this. This is what one of the British scholars, Nick Chisman, was calling hegemonic instability in Africa. That the countries that are supposed to backstop, problems of, peace and security are themselves unstable. But Kenya seems to be an exception to that, particularly after the election. We have not reached the level of instability that you find in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, and so on. And therefore, the resistance by the military itself is indicating that Kenya is aligned to the rapid response force. But I don't think that is IGAD's position. Let me stop there for now.
Right, but we have to respect as well their sentiments if they feel at all that one country has taken sides as well.
No, Kenya did not choose itself to be the chair of IGAD. Let's get it clear. And therefore, rebellion by one of the actors does not mean that they are right. They are not, by rejecting it, but does not mean they are right. Two, I have argued that of all the core leaders in this quartet, the most competent is Kenya to handle the matter. And two, it is not Kenya that is dealing with this matter. This is an IGAD matter. And it is governed by IGAD rules. So when somebody says the one is aligned to this and this, let them come in and they point out at what kind of favoritism is coming in.
Right.
It's a very normal strategy for countries to reject the chair in negotiations because it gives the chair, after he's confirmed, a leeway over accusations. It's a very strategic way of negotiations. And I think that what Sudan is doing is pathetic, because I feel that what is happening in Khartoum and what's happening in Omdurman and Port Said, Debal, there are massive war crimes that have now occurred in that country. As I correctly predicted last time, there's about 1 million refugees that have poured into Chad. This is not the time for the president of Sudan to say the chair of IGAD is biased or not biased. What we need are direct talks. And I really want to criticize the head of the Rapid Response Force, Mr. Dr. Abbas, who said that we cannot go to Sudan unless Mr. Burhan tells us to. I mean, Debal, there is such a thing as international relations, but also there is such a thing as relations of the international. And, by that I mean, Debal, that the responsibility to protect Africans and civilians in dire need will not be put in a theoretical norms about who is going to invite us and who is not going to invite us. I think that there's a direct, immediate and profound danger to the very stability of our region. And that cannot be placed on the fulcrum of asking Mr. Burhan, who is the person who led a coup d'etat in Sudan, that whether or not the niceties of international relations are going to be extended to the rapid response team to go and save people in Khartoum. I find this to be, rather outrageous, Mr. Debal, if I can put it to you. Secondly, Debal, I feel that we have already spoken in IGAD, we have already spoken. The time to speak is over. It's a time to act. And it is high time that states in our region begin to understand that if we do not act, I argued last time that international terrorism is going to go and sit and drink coffee on the streets of Khartoum. And Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan, which is already a fragile state, Uganda, are going to be in deep, deep trouble. Debal, this is not, if I can use a French word, to pussyfoot around this issue. I think it is very, very important for an immediate, thought-out military action to prevent these forces from destroying the first independent black state in Africa. It is, as President Museveni correctly put, it puts paid to the idea of independence in our countries. I think the human rights of the people of Sudan, the right for their protection, supersede nice cafe norms about international relations. We need to act, and we need to act now on the Sudan.
Right. I want to just jump in also and just say, I completely agree with Hash in terms of sense of urgency. I mean, we've seen it's just over 600 deaths, according to the figures, and up to 3 million people are in flight at the moment, either, fleeing the conflict in the country or to the neighboring areas. So it is really, I think it is really critical, and there is an imperative to actually decisively bring this to an end. And I just note that the 600 people are just slightly less by 100 the number of people that we've seen lost in Shakahola. So just to remind ourselves, if I could just make two connections. One is in terms of the horror of Sudan, but also the horror of Shakahola as the Senate committee continues to take testimony. And I think in the newspapers today we have the testimony of the Cabinet Secretary for Interior.
All right.
Yes.
I think we should just take a short break. Then when we circle back, we shall hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenja. As you can see also on screen, this is a communique there on the first meeting of the IGAD Quartet group of countries for the resolution of situation in the Republic of Sudan. And that was on Monday the 10th. The meeting was chaired by His Excellency William Ruto. You had him speaking there. Also in attendance, we had His Excellency Abiy Ahmed Ali, Prime Minister of Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Honorable Mohammed Ali Yusuf, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Djibouti, representing His Excellency the President of Republic of Djibouti and Chairperson of IGAD, and Honorable Benjamin Bolmel, Special Envoy of the Republic of South Sudan, representing His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Sudan and Deputy Chairperson of IGAD. Maybe also what we need to tease out was in this quartet we have South Sudan, and still they have issues as well at home. And when we hear the professor talking about Kenya being the most qualified to actually be chairing this particular quartet, the question will be then how do you constitute a quartet? A country that also has a warring faction ongoing, coming to mediate another country that also there's a flare-up. I think that one is sort of a paradox that we cannot really understand, but it is at that on the other side of the break.
KTN News. Get the whole story. When it comes to your motoring needs and likes, there is only one place where you will find the best automotive dealers and enthusiasts alike. You will enjoy the best deals on vehicles, spare parts, insurance, and asset financing tailored to fit all your needs, all at the Digger Motor Show. It's the place you will want to be on the 20th of July 2023.
Jack Motors, we are the authorized distributor for light trucks and pickups in Kenya. The manufacturer is JSC Motors, which is based in FA, China, with a wide range of products. In our showroom, we do have N75 4-ton truck, and we also have T8 2000cc diesel turbo double cab. Other than the diesel versions, we have electric, the first double cab and 4-ton truck electric in Eastern Central Africa. Yeah, we have branches in Mombasa, Kisumu, and also here in Nairobi we have a branch along Mombasa Road and another one at Parklands. But our HQ is located at the River Road, just next to Subaru Kenya.
For a great time worth all your passion for bikes and cars and all types of vehicles, you will get the best experience at the annual Digger Motor Show with fellow petrolheads. Whether just to buy or to experience great motor engineering, find your way to KICC from Thursday 20th to Sunday 23rd July 2023 and be a part of the Grand Motor Show where business thrives and fun stays alive. For more information or participation, contact Caroline on 0723803601 or email cnyandieka@standardmedia.co.ke. This is KTN News.
Na unazubai hivi tu mtaani, si upite na mita uwe mshindi. Cheza Instamita na unaweza jishindia hadi mita 10 papo hapo bila ngoja ngoja. Game yenyewe ni rahisi sana. Bonyeza *239# sasa ushiriki. Usizubae bana. Cheza Instamita leo upate nafasi ya kujishindia mamita. Over 18s only. Gaming is addictive. Play responsibly. This message has been authorized by the BCLB. License number 880.
Africa Speaks, a groundbreaking show that brings you the beauty, diversity, and untold stories of Africa like never before. From the sprawling savannas to the bustling cities, from ancient traditions to modern innovations, Africa Speaks captures the essence of this magnificent continent done by Africans from an African perspective. Journey with us to the continent's tourist attraction and historical sites through Destination Africa. Learn from our ancestors' wise words on Proverb of the Day. Africa Speaks, where the voice of Africa echoes around the world.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Today. We continue with the conversation. This is the tail end of the program right now. Still focusing on Sudan and the crisis therein. And we're discussing the latest development with the IGAD meeting that happened on Monday. And we had also the government taking special umbrage with the position of the leadership of IGAD. But still, as we continue with the discussion, we want also to follow up with the summit that will be coming up next week, where Egypt will host a summit of Sudan's neighbors on July the 13th, which happens to be tomorrow, to discuss ways to end a 12-week conflict between rival Sudanese military factions that has triggered a major humanitarian crisis in the region, as we're discussing right now. And the diplomatic efforts to hold fighting between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces have so far proved ineffective, with competing initiatives creating confusion over how the warring parties might be brought to negotiate. Neither Egypt has been seen as the Sudanese army's most important foreign ally, nor the United Arab Emirates, which has had close ties to the RSF and have played a prominent public role, of course. The summit in Cairo on Thursday aims to develop effective mechanisms with neighboring states to settle the conflict peacefully. And this is where I want to pick the brains also of Dr. Hassan Kanenje as well. So here on Monday, we had one in Ethiopia, another one in Egypt tomorrow.
Part of the challenge to resolving the Sudan conflict has been these multiple efforts, coming from different quarters. Many cooks tend to spoil the broth, and that is why we need to, harmonize those efforts. Now, I like the new approach that IGAD, led by President Ruto, is taking, and he did, I think explicitly indicate he has spoken to Cairo, he has spoken to South African Republic, he has spoken to Chad. These are neighboring countries where either they're being serving as source for refugees or rather host for new refugees. But some of them, like in places such as Darfur and stuff like that, there is information that you are having groups moving from Chad actually coming to contribute to that conflict, especially where RSF has some strength. Now, we're going to need to expand these efforts beyond Cairo and Chad. We will need to be able to bring Riyadh and Abu Dhabi on board. And the reason is because they have some of the most influential actors in that they've served as benefactors to a number of key players, within Sudan. And as IGAD, if we make it very clear that it is important for the continent as Africa that you come on board with us, it's going to increase the likelihood of success. Egypt is another very important player. That is why I was happy that actually the president mentioned it, that he's spoken to Egypt. Now we need to speak to Egypt about supporting also that process, because they have an interest in Sudan. It's a neighboring country. They have strong standing relations with the Sudanese military. These are important players. Now, beyond that, then, once we get their support, some of the resistance that is coming against IGAD's mediation is probably going to start declining, because now you have all other options that the Sudanese parties may want to appeal to on board. Secondly, another thing we also need to do, we need to increase our back channel, efforts. Just not the formal ones that are out there that, for the public gallery, but the back channels in diplomacy. A lot of things are resolved, not from what people actually see, but what things are happening people do not see. In this country alone, we have a massive reservoir of people with experience and knowledge and with contacts across the board. Now, as a designated leader of the IGAD process in Sudan, we can draw even from larger, theater, where we draw from these other countries, say we need to put a team together that has the networks, has the familiarity with the key players, in Sudan, to ensure we can bring them on board. It's not about saber rattling. It's not about ultimatums and stuff like that. This is diplomacy. Now, I do agree with Prof. Parties are always going sometimes to play the brinkmanship kind of card. Sometimes they want to paint whoever the mediator is, in a wrong light or potential, so they extract certain advantages. But also, we did not start exactly on a good footing when we started this process. And we were, I think, talking a little bit too much to the extent where we did not inspire confidence on the other side. And that is why I think even as Kenya, people should stop, especially within government, commenting on things. Only the president and foreign affairs minister should be able to comment on the process. But number two, we have to make sure that whatever things they are saying, and I like because the president was reading, if you paid attention very clearly, because when you're reading, you cannot go out of the script. You're going to stay within that script. That we have to brief the team that is involved in that process very sufficiently, meaning this cannot be a one-time thing. It has to be a constant. We need to have a framework that is going to continue until the Kenyan leadership, delivers. Now, finally, among the countries in the region, not only is Kenya the most stable, is the one that has the most capacity to be able to mediate this. Now, the parties, even Sudan itself, may have certain reservations. As we mentioned, South Sudan is still trying to recover from its own, demons, while they still have a lot of political and diplomatic capital in Khartoum, and therefore we can also deploy them strategically. They may not have the capacity to host the kind of probably long, drawn-out negotiations that may need to take place. Neither does it have the capacity to mobilize international actors the way, for instance, Nairobi can be able to mobilize to bring them. And so, as a conclusion, I would like to appeal to our brother Burhan and Hemedi to relook and rethink about the resistance to IGAD efforts, because this is the best choice we have right now to resolve the conflict.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. We need to be winding up on it unless Peter Kagonja can see you have something.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a same point that I made in regard to Kenya's mediation in the Congo. I guess, I don't know whether it's Abraham Lincoln who once said that if you have 6 hours to cut a tree,
that's it.
Yeah, you would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe and only 2 hours cutting the tree, which I thought was a kind of wisdom, really wise. And therefore, Kenya should spend 4 hours sharpening its diplomatic axe.
Correct.
And only 2 hours cutting the tree. Some of the hiccups we are finding here is simply because of that. That we put our act together in terms of preparation, knowledge of Sudan and the origin of conflict, knowledge of the parties involved, and I think that's what Dr. Hanenje was mentioning here, that this is a complex mediation. First and foremost, it is not your usual mediation in terms of the protagonists. These are three revolutions unfolding back to back. It all started with food protest by civilians, then a coup by the two leaders, then an agreed transition, and this transition put a prime minister, and then a coup occurred by the same two guys, and the two guys are now at war with each other. So the unraveling of Sudan has come in many faces. Who are you mediating? Is it Burhan? And what about the civilians, who originally are the ones who are asking for the rights? Where is Hamdok, Abdar Hamdok, who is the civilian who was toppled just a couple of months, or a year or so ago? So understanding the complexity of this conflict is key. Second, understanding the actors and their interest in this is also key, and being straightforward about it. If I was in IGAD, I would not allow Ethiopia to be in this mediation, because it's not going to add value. It's just going to attract responses by Egypt, because the geopolitics of the region are Egypt versus Ethiopia, because of the dam and so on. And that's why you now see these new summits springing up in Cairo, because this one is in Addis Ababa. So Kenya might be caught up in this kind of geopolitics. But since IGAD chose the quartet and that decision, I think Kenya should push the meetings to be elsewhere, so that you don't attract forces like Egypt. Because the moment Egypt is in, then you find that other countries come in. The geopolitics of the Middle East are basically spilling over into this particular conflict. Not to mention the war in Ukraine. It's also part of this, because they said, much of the support, the gold and so on, that is going to Russia is coming from this other end. So looking at it that way, then you see, how does victory in this mediation look like? Who will be satisfied and who is not going to be a spoiler in the peace process? Otherwise, we may have meetings. I guess the most important thing now is to silence the guns. After we silence the guns, then we see what else can be done. But this is going to be a long, drawn mediation. It's not a short time. Which leads now to the final point, which is Kenya need to build capacity for this kind of activities. So far, we've been ad hoc. And one want to emphasize, if we don't have permanent capacity of a certain nature within the government, for example, we have argued in the past that this is the time we need Kenya aid, the equivalent of Canadian aid and Swedish aid and so on, where even partners would put money in, which is already in a predictable manner. South Africa has already put its own Renaissance Fund. The Renaissance Fund is what supports South Africa's intervention in the rest of African countries. We don't have a systematic, predictable mechanism of intervening. Yet, we are in Congo, we are in Sudan, we are in South Sudan, we are in Ethiopia, we are in Somalia. So how are we going to coordinate these things in an effective and predictable manner that can be monitored and can be evaluated for its merits and demerits?
Thank you. All right, even as we're speaking about Sudan and the East African community and the IGAD as well, we have AU Private Sector Forum that is ongoing. It began yesterday, where business delegates and officials are gathering in Nairobi, Kenya, for the 14th African Union Private Summit. If you just roll the auto cue for me. And this is also coming at a time when we know that we're trying to install the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. And this is the latest development so far. We want just to tease out this particular meeting that is ongoing in light of also what the East African community has been taking special umbrage with Kenya having an agreement with the EU on the preferential trade agreement just recently without the consultation of the East Africans. What does it really showcase in terms of the spirit of brotherhood and East African Federation that we're trying to reinstitute again after it tapered down over the years?
Kenya has always been a thorn on the side of the East African community. it has never been Uganda or Tanzania. The great Julius Nyerere argued for an immediate union at independence of the three countries. But we had a fellow called Charles Njonjo here who had much more power than he was supposed to have and had the ear of the late President Kenyatta. So the cabinet was a battle between the great late Munyo Wayaki and Mr. Njonjo. Mr. Njonjo actually wanted to bring apartheid South Africa into this country. And it is Mr. Moyaki, whose father was decapitated by the colonial forces, who said, "Over my dead body." Debal, that is when we had people in cabinet who could speak. Now we have Malala in cabinet. Debal, this is very important, that the African personality, which I am a great disciple of, that we ought to understand how the world is working. And without going into grand theories, Debal, I could just tell you that we have the North American Trade Agreement, we have the ASEAN Trade Agreement, we have the European Trade Agreement. Debal, we don't have trade agreements in this continent that are worth its salt. Because Debal, as our friend here now who has just come from China can testify to, is that there is nothing more important than having a regional approach to your economics, continental approach to your trade, regional approach to your diplomacy. All these things, Debal, are the ways of the future. And what is symptomatic of that, Debal, is our trapped refugees in migrants between the border of Libya and Tunisia. And you could see, Debal, the migrant boats that are going into Italy, that the people of Africa want to vote with their feet. They're leaving these nation states because they're not providing three things. They're not providing jobs, they're not providing jobs, and they're not providing jobs. And so these economic migrants and political migrants who are now under the Sahara, Debal, is indicative of the political failure of our leaders in our continent and in our region. In the 21st century, we should not be talking about Khartoum and the RSF and Burhan and coup d'etats. These are things from the past, Debal. These are caricatures from the 20th century. What we are supposed to be speaking about is how to provide, as my learned senior said, of this bulge that 80% of the population of Africa is between 18 and 30. And those people need jobs, housing, schools, education, infrastructure. So the last 60 years has been squandered. And the Afro-pessimists have had their day. It is today very important that this meeting, which is supposed to bring together people of Africa to form their own blocs, is critical for our emergence as a power and a renaissance in the future. Debal, if we cannot understand these basic concepts, then we are done. Debal, here is the Chinese newspaper. China does not speak of itself anymore as just China, and it's the second largest economy in the world. It speaks of itself as ASEAN. Every time you hear about trade, China, the China trade spokesman of the foreign ministry, they says ASEAN. Then they speak of China. We have to get that. We have to get that. There's a saying in my language. It says, to smell the hortagela, which means, you go to the camp of where the camels feed. You have to their smell itself will tell you that there are camels there. So, Debal, I feel very, very strongly about these issues because our young people are suffering. Jobs are not there. The cost of living is insane. If leaders in Africa in the last 50 years had a plan about the economy, had a plan about their politics, had a plan about their society, we would not be throwing stones here in Nairobi. We would be going to jobs, decent jobs that give people decent pay. And I want to say about that, in the words of the great CLR James, this is confusion made worse confounded.
All right, we want just to move the discussion, unless Rungu Houghton, you have anything to say regarding this particular meeting that is ongoing, especially the Spirit of Africa Free Continental Trade Area, that we're still trying to shake it into place so far.
Maybe just a very brief comment, which is, last night I was with about 500 women that had come together as part of the Solidarity for African Women's Rights Coalition, and they have been pursuing the implementation of the Maputo Protocol on gender equality and women's rights in Africa. And I was really present to how powerful Africa can be when governments and civil society organizations work together on particular African Union conventions and protocols. And I don't see why this would be any different with the Continental Free Trade Area that's been proposed. But I think we need to see a society-wide, continental-wide approach to this this area of importance that I think Hashi has spoken about.
Thank you. All right, we need just to go to also the summit that is ongoing. That is a NATO summit where NATO leaders say they will allow Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met, hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky blasted the organization's failure to set a timetable for his country as absurd. We reaffirmed Ukraine will become a member of NATO and agreed to remove the requirement for a membership action plan. That is what NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters, referring to a key step in joining alliance. And he said this will change Ukraine's membership path from a two-step path to a one-step path. Although many NATO members have funneled arms and ammunition to Zelensky's forces, there is no consensus among the 31 allies for admitting Ukraine into NATO's ranks. Instead, alliance leaders decided to remove obstacles on Ukraine's membership path. Right, let's just discuss this latest development so far. And I know even for this particular meeting, we have the president of Turkey who has given a thumbs up now for Sweden actually to be joining NATO. And this comes at the cusp just when we had the NATO summit now beginning. Let's begin with you, Dr. Kanenje.
I think everything that is being done in this conflict in Ukraine does not give us any hope that there's going to be an end to the conflict anytime soon. I don't care who is going to be in Russia, whether it's going to be Putin or somebody else. It is unlikely that any leader in Moscow is ever going to allow Ukraine to be peaceful if, for instance, their prospect is going to join NATO. Mm-hmm. It's just the way generally the world works, and especially when big powers are enemies. France announced yesterday they're going to sell long-range missiles to Ukraine. Now that might even escalate the conflict further. And so the things which we've been saying, I think Europe and generally the world and the West has been very peaceful for a very long time, that perhaps they are craving for war and for blood on their own territories. And that is why I think this thing is being done. Now that does not mean that Putin is an angel or he's not doing some bad things. But there is no desire from any part so far that we have seen that says they want this conflict to end. And so for those of us in the global south in Kenya, perhaps we need to prepare for the worst and perhaps diversify our sources, or whether it's energy or anything else, because it may be a very long, cold winter economically and geopolitically.
Mm-hmm. Right. Peter Kagwanja.
The big issue here is that this war in the first place was about Ukraine joining NATO. And Russia has been hesitant about having NATO as its neighbor, given the old rivalries of the Warsaw Pact and the NATO. And now for NATO to accelerate the accession of Ukraine to the NATO status is basically aggravating the situation. So as Kanenje rightly put it, I don't see a quick fix to this particular problem. There is none. And we are in for a long haul in this war. And God forbid that we move to the escalation of nuclear armaments in the conflict. Mm-hmm. We have already seen the use of hypersonic arms in this situation. We hope that we don't get there. It is possible to respect the world order the way it is. I think the West is still beholden to this idea of hegemonic stability, which is not going to work. Hegemonic stability is gone, meaning there must be one power that is the policeman of the world, and around it alliances. The U.S. itself, the source of power is actually on the decline. The post-war, Second World War American power was based on a number of things. One was, of course, the power of the dollar, which is now being eroded through this across the globe de-dollarization movement, and we need to look at it deeply. The second, of course, was the transatlantic alliance, and the transatlantic alliance itself is declining on two accounts. That the allies of the Americans themselves are taking very, very dependent positions in a number of cases. Right. And two, within America itself, the Trump kind of populists are not for the idea of America supporting. They're more isolationists. Right. They don't want these kind of things. And of course, thirdly, the live American challenges to America are no longer one that you can now zero in on China, or you zero in on Russia, or you zero in on Iran. They are now multiple, and the world is going to be genuinely multipolar. What does that mean? Now, incorporating or bringing Ukraine into NATO is not going to add value. It is just going to escalate the geopolitical rivalries and now the conflicts that we are witnessing in this country. So I would advise against that accelerated Ukrainian accession to NATO, because it's not useful for global peace.
Right. In 1994, I have a different view from my friends and colleagues.
Briefly on it, so that we need to take
in 1944, there was something called the Battle of the Bulge, where Germany made its last attempt to try and break the Allies. That was the decisive battle of the Second World War, and it failed. This is the Battle of the Bulge by NATO on theoretical terms. I think there's going to be peace in a month or two, but this is a way of showing Russia that it has to come to the table and negotiate, because the Allies want to negotiate from what is called a position of strength. So I think that, in my view, this is a military and diplomatic tiger that has raised his head to show that they want peace, but it has to show from a position of strength. Just as much as the Second World War, Germany thought that it could break the Allies at the Battle of the Bulge, I think this is the theoretical one, and I think that China is the main axis in which peace can be played with Russia and Ukraine, and it's not NATO. And just last week, all the Americans were in China, and the thing that they were talking about is peace between Ukraine and Russia.
All right, we need to take a short break right now, but Peter Kagwenja will be leaving as well, and Irungu Huto? Yeah, but still we need to hang on and talk about Shakahola, because we'll revisit what also the CS had to say. But you can give us just your closing remarks briefly as you go. You're in a tearing rush, I know. You had said you have a meeting.
No, I'm going to Nyeri. We are interviewing lecturers for our TVETs from the region, and I happen to be the chair of Moranga Technical Training Institute. So I need 10 teachers or 10 lecturers. Otherwise, I'm paying heavily for BOG teachers. Very, very expensive. Now, I think the main point is to tell Hashi not to go to throw stones today. I think my closing remarks are simply that Hashi should not go to throw stones. Why? Because it's futile. Throwing stones and demonstrations are not going to alter our post-election situation. And on Sunday, I did a quick analysis of what I see as a situation in Kenya. And I argued that, yes, President William Ruto has two challenges and who he has to vanquish. One, of course, is Raila Odinga and the alliance around him. And that's not a new challenger, that's an old challenger. If I was able, I would keep Raila as my challenger, because you're such an easy person to box in 2027, and Ruto will get a walk through.
In your view?
No, that is my view, because the sentiments on the ground have not changed much. That's one view, that challenger. The second challenger is Ruto versus the economy. And it is the economy that's going to give Ruto a knockout if he does not put it together and win. So for me, Raila is not a challenger. The main challenger is the economy. And if Ruto does not fix the economy, the way it is, if it does not strike a good deal with Iran and get the oil flowing into the country and petroleum going, the cost of energy going down, we're going to be in a lot of things. So I wanted to bring those two challenges, Raila Odinga and the economy. These are the two challenges.
I'm sorry you'll not be here for my response.
All right, we take a short break right now. The Mandamano